So I supported Danny for just over 2 years. I worked with Danny in a home that he lived in. He lived there for quite a while. Um, he was an older gentleman and he was just the best man that you could ever meet. Honestly, he was a light in any room that you'd walk into. Everybody that knew Danny loved Danny. Like, to know him was to love him truly. Like, I know people say that, but that's truly who he was. You would walk into a room and he would smile and he'd come up to you and he'd pat you on the back and he'd just make you feel so welcome to be there. And he was so excited to see everybody, and it didn't matter who you were or what was going on with you. He found a way to make you feel good and make you feel better. And he was always smiling. He was always laughing. And I worked with Danny in that home, and Danny got a diagnosis of a terminal brain tumor while he lived there. And we tried to do some palliative care in the home, and it became a little too much to do in the home between Danny's needs and between the impact that it had on Danny's housemates and the impact that it had on staff. So it became clear that it was time for Danny to go into hospice. And at that time, Danny was welcomed into Lazard House, which was a big step for all of us to not let go of, but transfer Danny into somebody else's care, because we, cared for Danny day in and day out. And, like when you work in a group home, that becomes your second family, because you're in a home, you contribute to a part of a home, and you're in somebody's home all day. So being able to transfer him into somebody else's care was a big thing for all of us, for the other participants and for the staff. But everybody at Lazard House made it very seamless. It was very hard for us, but they let us come whenever we needed to. They were extremely welcoming with us, with the participants, like with Danny's housemates. They made them feel super helpful, made them feel super welcome, took them to the kitchen to get snacks, let them help Danny however they wanted to. And they took a lot of time and a lot of care to understand Danny, which was a big thing for us, because Danny was someone who didn't communicate with words. He communicated with sign language, with home sign, with sounds, with expressions, and with his hands. So if you don't know how to communicate like that, it can be really hard to understand somebody. And the team there, took a lot of time to figure that out, and they put in the work, and they really quickly caught on, and they asked us all the time. They were asking us, what does this mean? How can we talk like this? Like asking us lots and lots of questions on how they can better communicate with him, which was something that was really important to us, because it's very easy to dismiss things like that and to push that stuff to the side and just say, I don't understand it. But it was a lot of care that went into that, and that really shined through to us specifically.
Well, I mean, initially, community living and staff and his housemates were able to come into Lazard House, and we all worked together. And then the pandemic hit. And at the same time, we had a flood at Lazard. So all of our residents from Lazard were moved to Innisfree. And at that time, everything was shut down. So none of Danny's support system could come in any longer. And so their support continued online, and they were so gracious in terms of daily Zoom calls. And we continued with the education around help us understand, like, Danny would use new hand signs or something. And we're like, what does this mean? And we'd have conversations with Karley or the rest of the team about what does this mean, and help us understand this. And, what are his likes around this? And just that we received so much coaching and education around how to care for him, but we were able to do that over Zoom. But I think also in addition to that was maintaining the social contact. He was so connected to the team there and to his housemates that those daily phone calls were so important. And when he was anticipating them, he would give us the phone signal, like, call, we're like, yes, yeah, at 4:00 or whatever time we had it scheduled for, but daily. And I think that that's really what helped us was community living made an effort, a really strong effort to stay connected and to help support us in caring for Danny. And that's really what made it successful.
Before we came to Lazard House, we had, when we were working on doing the palliative care in the home, we were trying to do that first. We had a lot of PSWs coming in and out of the home to try and support Danny that way, because obviously his physical needs were getting higher. And when there's a rotating door of people who don't know him and can't understand his form of communication or the way that he communicates, which takes a little bit to learn, it wasn't good, because they couldn't understand what was going on. And like every 3 seconds they would come out and he would get extremely frustrated because he wasn't being understood. And, I think we can all relate to that. Like when you're trying to get something across and you feel like someone's not listening to you or someone's not trying to understand you, it's unbelievably frustrating. And like, he's just trying to tell them like, hey, I don't want the water here. Like, I don't like that soap, like it's a really easy thing for him to try to say to someone that knows him. But if that person doesn't know him, then it's going to happen anyway, and he feels like he doesn't have a say, right? And he's losing that feeling of autonomy, and nobody wants to lose that feeling. So coming to Innisfree and then coming to Lizard and then coming to Innisfree, we had done this for the PSWs, but they weren't there enough to utilize it, I don't think. But we had made initially like a flip book of Danny's regular signs. So like I laminated a bunch of different signs that Danny would use and put them on a key ring, so that they would be there. And like if you needed to learn which ones they were, they would be there. And then we would go through them over Zoom. A lot of the time, like Danny would do them on Zoom and we'd be like, oh, this is what this means. And, the staff there would ask, or like we would engage with him that way and they would see it. And eventually, they were learning them too and doing them with them, and we would see it too. And it was really great to be able to see that. And I think that it means a lot, especially working with folks who have disabilities, whether it be developmental or any kind of disability, right? Is that feeling of respect. I think this goes across everybody, like it transcends disability, right? But like that feeling of autonomy as well, because I think that gets dismissed a lot in that realm, is that people lose that a lot of the time, and they're just kind of told what to do and they're told what's going to happen, and being able to be treated, with respect, like the unexpected dignity of choice, right? Like that comes along with that kind of stuff, and being able to verbalize those things or to not verbalize them and have someone understand what you're trying to say and have that respected. And I think that really, really came through the time and the patience and the care, and truly the love that came out of Innisfree and Lizard and all of the staff there, and like the time that was put in to understand Danny and all of the intricacies and the pieces of him. Like that was amazing, and I appreciated that so much, because it's often overlooked and it's easy to overlook, and that was not something that happened.
So I think that was key, because he felt understood, he felt heard, and the whole team made an effort to learn those things and would use them in communicating with him. And you're right, that does promote his autonomy and his dignity, because it allows him to make the choices that he wanted to make for himself. And that's a big part of our philosophy, as it is for you in your organization. And so I'm glad that those values aligned, because I think for Danny, that meant more seamless care, that we could continue with that from our perspective. And I can't imagine how hard it was for him not to be connected physically with you, but if we were able to transfer some of that and allow us to care for him as well as possible, your support certainly made a difference around that.
Well, I'm so grateful, like, not being able to be there, and the little bit of time that we were allowed to be there, I think you guys saw like how we interacted physically with Danny and the way that Danny liked to be physically interacted with. And I think that was picked up, and I think that was carried through, which I appreciate very much. Like I could see it in all of the phone calls, like Danny liked having his hair touched, and guys would touch his hair, and like he liked to be like, like joked around with physically, and like you guys would do that. And I appreciated that so much. And like, in like that last couple of days, like being able to go in there and to like be with him and like to touch his hand and to touch his hair again, like that was a lot. And like it meant the world to me to be able to like do that at the beginning, to know that it was happening all the way through, and then to come in and do it at the end again. Like, sorry. Just to know that level of care and that, those things that he needed, like never stopped at any point throughout that time that I wasn't able to be there.
And we are so grateful to community living for allowing the staff to come in and stay with Danny. And, our philosophy is that if someone can't be with someone when they're dying, then we will have staff stay with them.
Mm.
So he wouldn't have been alone, but he
Yeah.
was with people who knew him best, and our staff could come in and support you,
Yeah.
the three of you that were staying with him. And we knew he wasn't alone, and he was with people who were very familiar with him.
Mhm.
And, and then we had Norm phoning in and talking to him. So everyone who loved and cared about him surrounded him. And
Yeah. I think like when I, think about death and stuff like that, when I think about the way that I would want to go or the way that I would want someone that I love to go, like, I think that's ideally the way that I would want it to happen, like
Yeah.
It was calm, it was peaceful. He had his light that he loved on. He had his radio on, which he was obsessed with. He was obsessed with that radio. We were listening to an album that he loved. We were sitting there, we were all holding his hand. He was surrounded by love between the staff at CLC, between the staff at Innisfree. Like he had so many people that loved him in there, checking on him and saying goodbye in and out. I don't think it could have been like, I know he felt loved. So I think that's the best it could have possibly been.
I agree.
Yeah. And I'm very grateful that you guys were able to facilitate that. So thank you.
But thank you, right? Like it was, I think the point of all of this is how well, like we all work together, but the, how imperative it was for all of us work together. Yeah. Neither of us could have done this in isolation. You couldn't have provided the end of life care to Danny at his home, and we couldn't have done cared for him the same way without all of you providing support and helping support us in caring for him, right? So I think that is the beauty of it, that we were able to all work together and do this as well as we could. And it was such a privilege.
Yeah, it really was. I think that's the best way to describe it. It was a privilege to work with Danny, to work with you guys, to have this experience. All of it. It was a privilege.